Conservative activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed at an event at Utah Valley University. The same day, a student opened fire at his Colorado high school, shooting 2 teens before turning the gun on himself. Another tragic chapter in America's gun violence.
Yes, and let me start out by saying I do not know Charlie Kirk personally, never met him, but my heart goes out to his family and to his friends and all those who knew him and loved him. It's a very sad thing to see a young man struck down by gun violence, gun homicide. You all have my deepest condolences. But there are some much bigger issues in the air right now. The tragedy of Charlie Kirk, as our introduction indicated, is just one part of the enormous tragedy of gun violence in America. 15,000 gun murders every year in this country. That's about 41 gun murders every single day. Murders affecting family members, friends, rippling out into the community, making people fearful and worried, creating stress disorders. 41 per day gun murders. Add on to that the number of gun suicides and gun accidents, and you're getting close, get this, to 40,000, Sam, gun deaths every year. That is more than 100 gun deaths every single day in America. And it need not be this way. We are unique among our democratic, industrialized peer nations in the carnage wrought by gun fire. And it has nothing to do with gangs or drugs or mental health or poverty. All those other nations suffer from those same threats and problems. But in fact, if you live here in the United States, you are 20 times, not 20%, 20 times more likely to die by gun homicide than our friends in our closest peer nations, the G7 group of nations, nations like Canada, UK, Germany, France, and Australia. 20 times per capita more likely to be a victim of gun homicide. But to listen to the gun lobby, the gun manufacturers, the NRA, you would think just the opposite. They want to brainwash you. They want you to believe the lack of serious gun controls in this country makes us the safest country. In fact, the data is just the opposite. The only distinction between the U.S. and these other nations is how we deal with guns. And it's not as if reasonable gun controls, which don't involve confiscation of guns, that's just another scare tactic. Overwhelmingly, the American people favor reasonable gun controls like increased background checks, bans on high-capacity magazines, gun permits, and yet the gun lobby, the gun manufacturers have denied the right of the American people to make us so much more safer. But Sam mentioned another mass shooting. I think there were actually ultimately 4 victims, 3 of whom were in critical condition. Another one was also sent to the hospital.
There were 3 there were 2 victims and a shooter.
I thought there were 3 sent to the hospital, but let's not quibble about it.
I looked this up beforehand.
There weren't 3 sent to the hospital?
There was a shooter who
I understand that, but leave aside the shooter.
And 2 teens in critical condition at the hospital.
And weren't there more wounded who were not in critical condition?
Not that I know.
All right, doesn't matter. I've lost my track now. All right, I'm back on it. This was now, depending on how you look at it, and we look at the Gun Violence Archive, more than 300 mass shootings just this year. That's way more than one mass shooting a day in America, because we're only 8 months plus into the year, and we've got 300 or slightly more than 300 mass shootings, more than all of our peer nations combined. It's not even close.
I'd like to add that according to Everytown, there have been at least 100 shootings at schools in 2025 already. That includes with deaths, with injuries, and with no deaths or injuries.
So a lot of those aren't even counted, because the only ones counted in this tally of 306 are mass shootings with victims. So in fact, you're absolutely right, Sam. If you add that in, it's going to be even more, at least attempted mass shootings, or mass shootings that somehow, thankfully, did not result in deaths or injuries. But when I looked at the gun violence archive, there were 44 school shootings that did result in deaths or injuries, including the one that occurred apparently within minutes of the assassination of Charlie Kirk. It occurred, I think, Sam, at a high school in Colorado.
Yes.
Right? Which, was, I think, the site of, the first mass shooting that really seared mass shootings into the national consciousness, Columbine High School, way back in 1999. And back then we got thoughts and prayers, and 26 years later, thousands of mass shootings later, what do we get? Thoughts and prayers again. And it is a sad state. While we genuinely mourn for what happened to Charlie Kirk, mass shootings have become so routine and so normalized, Sam, that we virtually ignored what happened at this high school in Colorado. Just business as usual. Oh my God, another shooting at a school, 1 out of 100, another mass shooting, 1 out of 300 plus. We become inured to it. And that is the saddest possible state. And
yeah, I agree.
This has been going on for decades with no answer. Now, you would think that the friends, the supporters, the political allies of Charlie Kirk would take this tragedy and try to use it in a way to dampen down political polarization, to dampen down the hatred of one another, and try as hard as they possibly can to avoid further similar acts of violence. You would think that's what they would do. Did they do that, Sam?
You tell me.
Just the opposite. Not only did they politicize this tragedy, but far worse than that, they have used it as an excuse to take revenge on their enemies, to declare their enemies terrorists, un-American, dangerous criminals, and even to declare war against their political enemies. Exactly the opposite of what any responsible group of American leaders should be doing, which is turning down the temperature, avoiding stoking hate across our political views, trying as hard as possible to take actions that would diminish the chances of further violence. Thanks for watching our video, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and become a member today.